You're watching PM Agenda. The Senate has just voted to extend its sitting hours tonight. This is the debate over the data retention bill, the metadata bill, that will go through because the government and Labor have reached an agreement on this. The bill went through the lower house last week, but the debate will continue in the Senate because there are a number of crossbenchers still with concerns about this. Joining me now to discuss this and some other issues, the Communications Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Good afternoon to you.
Great to be with you, David.
Now, I want to pick up on one of the concerns raised by the crossbenchers, the sort of crimes that metadata can be used to investigate. In the law that's being debated, are there any restrictions on whether it is just serious crime or whether it can be petty stuff as well?
Well, it's any crime, but I mean, quite frankly, you wouldn't want to limit it to just serious crimes. I mean, it's important to remember that when we talk about metadata, we're just talking about what used to be called in the old days call charge records for telephones. So time of call, who called whom at what time, what place.
What about the location?
And the location, yeah, all of that stuff that you used to get in your telephone bill on your mobile phone. I think you did in your mobile phone. It used to say where you'd made the call. At least I recall it in mine.
Well, Nick Xenophon today was saying that Telstra doesn't currently store that, and under this bill they'll have to.
I'm not sure he's right there, but they certainly used to. But look, there's a lot. But let me get back to the key point that you're making. Let's say somebody is somebody is found injured, somebody is lost. There are all sorts of issues. Somebody is suspected of committing a crime at a particular location. All of this data, it can be very, very important, not just to find someone who's committed a crime, but also to exculpate them. And you see, these are basically business records of the telcos, and they've been accessed. They've been kept for very long periods. In Telstra's case, they used to keep their telephone records for 7 years, and they may still do. But they've been kept generally for long periods. But differing between telcos. They've been accessed by dozens and dozens of agencies, right down to the RSPCA. So all we're doing here, this is not. A lot
of people weren't aware of this, were they?
No.
Now this has shone a light on the whole issue.
David, you've put your finger, characteristically, if I may say so, right on the key point. People didn't realise this was going on. The fact is, we're actually narrowing the scope dramatically of who's able to access this material to essentially the police and ASIO and similar agencies. We're providing real oversight in the sense of the Ombudsman and the Parliamentary Committee. We are saying that the retention period will be uniform, so it'll be 2 years. So this is in fact a much more circumscribed and protected and if you like, oversighted regime than you had before. But of course your point is that people didn't realise it was there in the first place.
And some people are worried about it. Some of the smaller players haven't kept the data for that long. Now they'll have to keep it for 2 years. What's the cost going to be and who's going to wear it?
Well, there are estimates that range between 200 and 300 million capex to set it up. But that's obviously a pretty big spread. We have committed to the government paying a substantial portion of it. And we're still in discussions.
More than half?
Well, I won't go any further. I don't want to tread further than my brief. I have a very good idea of what we're proposing, but I can't go any further than to say substantial, and that's a term that I've used in the second reading speech. That's the government's commitment.
That's going to be a hit to the budget to some degree, isn't it? And also to the private sector.
Security. Look. This is really important from a security point of view. It really is. And the telcos are in a position where they don't need to keep this stuff for long periods or very long at all now because their business practices have changed. So the reason for this data retention measure is to ensure that this very valuable data is retained and that it is managed and oversighted and privacy is looked after and so forth in an appropriate way. So I think can I tell you, I really understand people's concerns about it. I respect them. But on the other hand, this is a very, very important part of the whole criminal investigation process. It's an important tool that the security agencies have to keep us safe and that they can access. And I think we've found, look, it's always, what I'm paid to do here, and all of the other members and senators are paid to do, is basically
apart from knocking over the
knocking over a little little plastic cup. There, what we're paid to do is to balance. You know, we've got competing interests: privacy on the one hand, security on the other. I think we found the right median.
The journalist protection that have been put in place, media companies welcome that. They're not entirely happy. I want to flip the question around and ask you, from the whistleblower's perspective, if you're a whistleblower with a legitimate bit of information you need to pass on, you should pass on to a journalist or indeed an MP, how should you do it, do you think?
Well, there is as you know, there are safeguards for whistleblowers, but it's quite, you know, there's some complexity and I guess uncertainty there. Well, if I was a journalist, and I used to be a journalist, if I was dealing with sources, I would use whatever means I could to ensure that they were protected. And I assume responsible journalists and responsible editors are ensuring their journalists are doing that.
And you don't think whistleblowers have anything to fear about this? Whistleblowers still being able to do what they need to do.
Well, they've got nothing in addition to fear, because those call charge records have been accessed by the police investigating leaks for decades, okay? So they're still going to be there. But of course, there is now, you know, you now have the ability by using over-the-top applications. It might just be something straightforward like WhatsApp. It might be a more encrypted over-the-top application to avoid leaving a trail at Telstra.
This is an interesting point, because WhatsApp or Wicker, and I think you're more familiar with some of these than I am.
I'm familiar with a lot of them.
This is a way to get around.
I am the communications minister.
Indeed. This is a way to get around data retention, isn't it?
It's a way to retain
that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you see, if you have a device, a smartphone, and if I call you just through the mobile phone network, then there will be a record at my carrier. Let's say my phone is with Telstra, then there's a record at Telstra that I've called your number. If, on the other hand, I communicate with you via Skype for a voice call or Viber, or I send you a message on WhatsApp or Wicker or Threema or Signal or, you know, Telegram, and there's a gazillion of them, or indeed if we have a FaceTime call, then all that the telco can see, insofar as it can see anything, is that my device has had a connection with, say, the Skype server or the WhatsApp server,
but not with me.
It doesn't see anything happening with you, and so you're right. So people have got to. It's important, I think, for journalists to remember. And again, this is
also for terrorists too, arguably, and child sex offenders as well. There are ways to get around this.
There are always ways for people to get around things, but of course a lot of people don't. And that's why I've always said the data retention laws, the use of metadata is not a silver bullet, it's not a 100% guarantee, it is one tool in many tools. But I think as far as journalists are concerned, I mean, as you know, I believe with Jefferson that if I had a choice of a government without journalists or journalists without government, I'd rather have the free press without the government. I really believe that.
Yeah, no.
And the work that you guys do is as important as anything that we politicians do to preserve our democracy. So again, there's a competing interest. You've got a duty to find out what's going on, and you've got a duty to protect your sources. On the other hand, the government and the police have got a duty to ensure that people in the Department of Defence are not, breaching national security by giving stuff to you.
I'm going to have to get on Wicker by the sounds of it. Now, let me turn to media laws.
They quote me in their ads. It's outrageous.
Apparently, the New South Wales Liberals do as well. Now, Netflix has arrived this week.
That's good. You're stylish.
Netflix has arrived this week.
Netflix, yes.
Presto,
that's safer ground.
Yes, exactly. QuickFlix, all of these streaming services are in operation now. And I just want to ask you, they're not subject to the same sort of rules around local content that the TV broadcasters are. Should they be?
Well, there's no proposal that they should be. I mean, for a start, they're not using any licensed spectrum. I mean, the deal, if you're a free-to-air broadcaster, the government says, here is some spectrum, a public asset, and in return for that, we'd like you to comply with these requirements about local content and other, broadcasting codes and so forth, and we'd also like a licence fee, please. And so it's a deal. That's what they're getting. People that are transmitting content
They don't need
over the
spectrum.
top. Well, that's right. They're using the internet and they're paying telcos for use of that platform.
So they don't have the same restrictions on local content or indeed on being able to broadcast to 100% of the country, which the TVs can't.
No.
I mean, is it a fair playing field, do you think?
I think the playing field is becoming very different. I mean, this is why I believe that there is a powerful case for changing the media ownership laws, in fact abolishing a number of them.
So will the government do that?
Well, that's a matter for the government, and I'm just one minister in the government, and this is something that we're considering. And this, by the way, is not, for those who are watching, not a leak or anything like that. We've had a very public consultation process which went through last year, and the upshot of that was that we would consider the options for reform, and that's what we're doing.
Will there be action on this year?
Well, again, that's a matter for the cabinet. But the bottom line is that the context of all this has changed. I mean, you look at the ownership rule that says you can only own, any given market 2 out of a newspaper, radio and TV, so you can't own all 3. That was written in a day when the only media were newspapers, radio and television. And of course now
there's online.
Now the online, and that trumps everything. And with respect to this Sky News is famous for having an incredibly youthful audience, but you do,
and intelligent too.
You do,
very good looking
and discerning.
Yes.
They're almost as good looking as the hosts. But what you're seeing is that the younger demographics, younger people, in other words, are watching less linear television, whether it's on pay or on free-to-air, and consuming more of their content over the net. And that's why it's important for say the ABC as a big integrated public broadcaster to do more online, because otherwise their audience will just get older and older. The median age of the ABC's prime-time television audience is 61. And now that's, now of course they're hitting the younger demographic with Triple J and with a lot of their online offerings and so forth. But it's really important to do that. It's important for us in politics too to remember that, a lot of there's a big chunk of the electorate that are not getting their news on the nightly news. They're getting it via Facebook or other online sources.
Let me finally turn to the budget. And you gave a speech, an interesting one, a couple of weeks ago at the Brisbane Club. You said we are in net debt to the tune of $245 billion, 14% of GDP. If we allow this situation to continue, we will put the security of every family and every business at risk. The deficits continue, our debt and interest payments balloon. So should the deficits be allowed to continue, do you think? Should the debt be allowed to get up to the sort of figures that have been discussed over the last week?
Well, we've got to start turning that, bringing down the deficits, absolutely, and we've got to bring down that debt. Now, the first thing you've got to do is get the budget into balance so that you're not adding additional debt each year. So that's
Government's backed off that by the sounds of it, though.
Well, I wouldn't. Look, I think there's a lot of people.
Or at least taking a slower approach.
People have been reading a lot into various observations by the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. I think we don't have long to wait for the budget. But do
you agree with what the Prime Minister's been saying about letting debt get up to the sort of levels that he flagged?
50 to 60% of net debt, 50 to 60% of GDP. Look, I've seen the reference to that, but the Prime Minister was not saying that that is desirable or a good thing.
But he was saying pretty good by world standards. In your speech, you made the point that Australia is not like Europe or the US. We are a small economy dependent upon imported capital and exposed to massive external shocks. So, I mean, we're not the same as Europe. That sort of debt will be disastrous.
Not. And let me be quite clear. It is a fundamental responsibility of this government, and indeed every government, to keep the budget balanced over the cycle. That doesn't mean you're going to be in balance every year, but you should run surpluses in the good years so that you can afford to run a deficit and to pump a bit of tyres into aggregate demand in the tough years. What we've got at the moment is a structural deficit. I mean, the problem is, bluntly, is that in the 6 years of Labor, for every dollar of additional revenue the government received, they spent 2. So they created this mess. They're not producing any alternative solutions to it. But our job is to fix it up. And I mean, there is nobody, no party, no group in this parliament, and our whole political system has more invested in responsible economic management than the Liberal Party. I mean, that is what we are all about. So I can assure you, from A to Z, from Abbott down to the the newest backbencher, we are all absolutely committed to budget repair.
Communications Minister Malcolm Turnbull, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a